We got a power outage over here in West Lynn. I go to the studio. In case you want to know where you are right now, you are attached on something the kids call a tripod to my steering wheel. And I got to tell you, there are some of you that know how the sausage is made. Like within the comment section, you will tell me I need to white balance or I'm overexposed. I appreciate all of that. But I do not have the powers of controlled light within my studio. I'm sitting in my truck right now. It's all dark. The whole city's in a panic mode. I got to tell you, I love a disaster. I love it. I pray for snow. I pray for disasters like this. I don't like it for my neighbors, right? Then I always find myself with my chainsaw over in somebody else's yard cutting down their trees and whatnot. I don't mind it at all. I like when the place shuts down. I like when people are locked in. I like to watch it, right? You ever see a storm? You sit in your window, you make sure your curtains are open, and you just watch the weather go. But I've got to tell you, when I need to come and talk to you guys, I'm in a little bit of a jam. So here we are, and I want to tell you this. There are things that Chimaev will do that if you did, I would not spare the lash. There are things that Chimaev can get away with. Another example would be Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor will do things that I will praise. But if you did them, you're going to look like a fool, and I'm going to be the one to let you know that. So how does that work? Why? Well, more specifically, Chimaev's coach today has made a comment that he would like Chimaev's next fight to be at middleweight and to be for the championship. Okay. There's no part of me that believes that Chimaev's coach believes his next fight can be against Pereira for the belt. However, right, his goal in saying it was just to get us talking. And I got to tell you, it jumped off the page to me. I'm sitting in the dark. I can't even get to my studio. My team is gone. I found a camera and I've mounted it on my steering wheel. It's that important of a topic for me to be discussing to you, which means he did the right thing. Oh, and by the way, you must understand why he can't get this fight. Why he's not going to get this fight. And moreover, I also believe I know what fight is going to get made, which is Adesanya versus Pereira, which is what you guys think as well. But there is a lot of commonalities that rematches have. There are many ingredients that every rematch has. That Chimaev, that Adesanya and Pereira are missing. For example, they're not trying to fight each other. That would be step number one, which means they would need Dana to come over the top of it and inform them this is the idea and the direction that we're going. And that happens to a lot of guys. That's unusual with Israel Adesanya. Adesanya has picked his opponent unlike anybody in UFC history. And quite frankly, Adesanya hasn't been here that long. Adesanya goes out today, he goes out with legend status, and he will find himself in the Hall of Fame. He hasn't been here that long. He not only cleaned out a division, he cleaned it out a second time. He has not been there that long. It's a remarkable thing what Izzy has achieved in a very short period. First time I hear from Adesanya, I'm getting ready to fight Anderson Silva, and a skinny kid out of New Zealand is giving me the business on Twitter. And his name was Israel Adesanya. He was like 16 years old. Before you know it, right, Anderson, who he was defending, he's in the ring with Anderson. The guy who he was bashing turns out to be one of his biggest supporters, right? I mean, what a difference a day makes. And I digress just to tell you guys that story, but I'll share with you, Adesanya versus Pereira makes sense. I get that. There's not middleweights available. They're all standing back thinking we're going in that direction. I'm here to tell you that's not a foregone conclusion. There was a massive lesson that played out in front of us, and it was Glover Teixeira. It was the MMA, like if you want to be a smart guy in MMA and you want to try to understand the business, the number one lesson of 2022, aside from the way the business was being done, where it quit being star-driven, you guys just love the sport so much, the brand started to get over, which is very different from other years, but I will just share with you, Glover is an important one to study. He has what I believe to be the greatest light heavyweight fight of all time. Great fights get rematched all the time. Wouldn't matter what the score was. Wouldn't matter who was beating who. If that's the greatest fight ever, you rematch them all the time. And they did everything within their power to not put Glover and Yuri Prochazka back in that cage together. Everything you could ever think of to find a different opponent and put them in. And the question is to why. Why are we not rematching the greatest fight that had ever happened? And that's where I want you to look. That's what I want you to look into. How Glover ended up with the spot. What was done on that card? Trying to bring Stipe and Jones in. Starting rumors that Stipe and Jones were coming in. Not correcting those rumors until the media buzz had already died down. I mean, I'll just share with you. They didn't want that match and finally found a way to stop that match. Glover still is going to be fighting for a title. How and why? And it's an amazing thing to study. And I'm giving you some pieces. I'm not tying in these in, right? I'm giving you an assignment. Go and study that. How and why? How and why was he not going to get the rematch with Prochazka? How and why did he end up with the rematch with Prochazka? How and why was that interfered with and two other guys were given an opportunity that they blew, and now he's back in the match with a totally different opponent? Be a very interesting case study for you, but I still bring those examples. Because Adesanya and Pereira are largely falling into the same category that Glover did, largely. It was an incredible fight. It was a shocking finish. There's a call and a need for a rematch. And the call and the need that is being supported for the most for the entire premise that it will be rematch is the fact that no other middleweight is speaking up. No other middleweight wants the opportunity. Well, all of a sudden we now have one. I mean, that is what Chimaev is offering us. The reason that I will predict for you, and the reason I would tell you in a normal circumstance, I wouldn't even like that he's calling for it. The reason for that is because he would be such a disgusting favorite to win. It's a style issue. And if he was to go out and pursue that, or they were to give it to him, it would be the same thing in hindsight when the match is done. If Chimaev does in fact tackle him and keep him there the entire time, it would look very obvious they just didn't want Pierre as champion. I don't think that's the case. I think Pierre's got a great story. I think he deserves to be there for a moment. And we could always do a trade. If I'm going to give you one, if I'm going to give you the single greatest matchup for the single greatest prize, if I'm going to give you one, then you got to give me one too, which is Bo Nickel. Bo does not have the star power, the attraction, or the belt that you're after. But if you're willing to fight him, then I know that you're just willing to fight anybody. In which case, all of a sudden, Pierre is back on the table, right? It'd be one of these things, and I don't mean from the promoter standpoint, I mean in yours. In you, in us, the viewer and the audience. We would need to see that. We don't want to see a guy see somebody else's skills and step in at the 11th hour thinking I can expose those. Oh, and by the way, there's a great reward up. If you didn't build to it in the first place. And Bo is just the example that I'm offering you because it would be the exact opposite of Pierre. There would be no belt. It wouldn't be a headline fight. It would be really interesting. It would be a hardcore lover's dream. It would be a wrestling heavy guy. It would be the exact opposite. Everything that Pierre has to offer, Bo Nickel would be the exact opposite, which is why, if you're willing to do that, right, and this has been tested before. This was tested with my own teammate, Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson's fighting for belts and main events. He's making more money than anybody on the roster, and all of a sudden he's got to fight a guy who's never even been in the UFC before. Named Husamar Pelharis, who had a trick move known as an inside heel hook, and people thought that he was going to go out and finish Dan Henderson. Dan just got tipped off. There's no video on the guy. The guy never fought before. But Paul Harris's own coaches and teammates couldn't keep their mouths shut. So we get word up here at Team Quest that this guy's a one-trick pony and he's got this technique. I'm just sharing for you. It's a different road. But then when Dan made that walk with no complaints, all of a sudden, he's back in title contention. He's back in main event spots. He's finding himself opposite Fedor Emelianenko down the road. I'm just sharing with you, if you can prove that you're willing to do both, we can have the conversation about the one that you want. I also think Chimaev is doing a great job by offering us this. And Chimaev's telling us a lot, right? We don't know if Chimaev is a middleweight or a welterweight. We don't know. As a matter of fact, his last weigh-in was straight in between the two. 178 pounds. What the hell is 178 pounds? But when he tells us that he's keeping a good look on Pereira, he got some back and forth going with Pereira. Like that is a very outside possibility. Very, very outside. But make no mistake, guys, it's in the top 2 of possibilities. There is no discussion of Whitaker getting pulled over here. There's no discussion of Vettori getting pulled over here. There's no discussion that Cannonier is going to be the guy. It's not even talk. It's not even dialogue. There is an expectation that it's going to go to Adesanya, and now there is an option to go to Chimaev. Chimaev has done everything right. He always does. Chimaev really does, and I think he does it on accident. Like, the Diaz boys are genius marketers. I think it's on accident. I think it's unintentionally. I think they just keep on getting it right. It just keeps happening. Adesanya, Sean O'Malley, strategic, smart, thought out process that gets them right where they want to go. The crystal ball they set down and the strategy that they wrote out, it plays out exactly that way. So it's a little bit different. I think that Chimaev keeps on getting it right. I think Chimaev's right now. I think he is correct to be calling this out. I think that Chimaev is correct at all times to find himself the most money against the easiest opponent. I think if you were to juxtapose Chimaev's 2 most recent options, you have his offering to fight for a world title against Pereira, or he has Dana's suggestion through the media that down the road, he's going to be opposite Colby Covington. I mean, if you looked at those 2 matches, right, which one would you rather have? And Chimaev's at least suggesting it. I think that that's very wise. I'm a little surprised the other middleweights aren't suggesting it. I think it's a miss. I don't know that Chimaev is going to get it. In fact, let me word that again. Chimaev is nowhere near getting that opportunity. Chimaev is the second option in line to get that opportunity. You tell me how you reconcile those 2 statements.